Hello everyone and welcome to video lecture 7 on Sketchup. This is for the AIA Architecture Interior Architecture stream. In this video we're going to look at 3 different parts of Sketchup. The first one is just the general tools, understanding how the basic tools of Sketchup work. The second part is going to be bringing our drawing from AutoCAD into Sketchup after cleaning it up a bit first, and then building the house proper. We're going to look at all of the main tools and the different things that you'll need to know to build your own house. And then the third part, we're going to look at how to export our perspectives out. So we'll need to know how to set up our cameras. We'll need to know how to do a sectional perspective so that we've got our exterior, our interior, and our sectional perspective. And then we'll need to know how to export that out as 2D lines, clean it up in Illustrator so that we've got nice, crisp, sharp lines and ready to take into Photoshop for our collaging. So lots to cover in this video. Let's get stuck in. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is, of course, download SketchUp. So if you go into Google, type in SketchUp Pro trial. We're looking for SketchUp Pro, SketchUp Studio. We want the one that is not the basic browser-based version because there's some tools that we need to be able to access which are in the upper level one. So look for SketchUp Pro trial. The top one here, SketchUp Australia, that's the one we're looking for. SketchUp free trial, click through that one. And then it'll just ask you to put your information in, tell them you're a student, that you're going to be using either PC, Windows, etc. That's basically for marketing. They'll try and contact you. It's the same company that you're going to end up paying for a subscription for if you want to use SketchUp long term anyway. So if you put in your student email in here, that will mean down the line you'll be able to get the student discount. Which brings me on to the next one. After your 30-day free trial finishes, if you're not finished with SketchUp and you've still got more work to do and you have to buy a license, do make sure you get the education version because it is quite a lot cheaper. So if you type in SketchUp for students, it's the same place, SketchUp Studio subscription for students, building point. We click through to here and we'll see that it's $90 for the year for subscription. So pretty cheap. So what's that, about $7 a month type of thing. Not too bad, pretty good. So click on that and of course make sure you put your student email in when doing that, same as you did with AutoCAD. And we're looking for the full version, either called SketchUp Pro or SketchUp Studio. Once we've done that and we've downloaded it, I'm going to go ahead and open up SketchUp now. Let's get rid of this one. And this will be our interface. Now, of course, we are always working with architectural millimeters. This is the scale we work at here. That is our drawing standards. So click on architectural millimeters and it will open up SketchUp for you. This is our pretty straightforward interface. There's not going to be anything in there at the moment, just this little person in there. We can go ahead and select them, delete them if we want to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go up to View and Toolbars because we're going to change what this looks like at the moment. The tools aren't set up for what we're going to be doing, so we're going to need to make some changes. So first thing, let's go to View, Toolbars, and then we're going to go ahead and get rid of Getting Started, and we're going to turn on the large tool set. You notice there's a lot more tools inside here, many of which would be far more useful for us than just the basic Getting Started kit. We're also going to turn on a few more down here. So we're going to turn on measurements. We need to be able to see what we're doing when we're taking measurements. That's this one down here. Very, very important. We're going to turn on our section tools, our shadows tools, our solid tools, our standard tools, styles, which allows us to say whether or not we're in the rendered version or just a 2D line version. Tags, which is pretty much the same as layers in AutoCAD, so you can have your layers in there, and then views, which is where we're going to be able to save our views to later. Perfect. Okay, so that's all the things we needed, and we can see why we needed to add a lot more stuff in there than what came as standard. So we can close that down now. Typically what I do now is I just kind of rearrange these and make sure they fit. Doesn't make any sense to me why we would leave this one down the bottom here because it just takes up extra room. So I usually just try and squish it all up into the toolbar depending on how wide my screen is. On my big screen, my big monitor, I can get all of these on one line, but in the smaller monitor I'm using today, this is probably going to be a closer approximation to what you're looking at on your screen. So we'll leave it like that for now. Over on the right hand side, I like to leave instructor turned on. This is a very, very useful tool as it tells you how to use the tool that you've currently got selected. So if I click on line, it's going to bring up all of the things I need to know about line, how to use it, tips, things like that. If I change that over to a rectangle, it'll change again. If I change that to my push-pull, it'll show me how to use that. So if ever you're getting confused, you can't quite remember how to use a specific tool or it's not working for you, come over to the Instructor tab, select the tool, and then you'll be able to read through what the intentions of the tool are. All right, we've got two more very important things to add before we get started, and I must make this very clear. If you don't do this, it's going to make it very difficult to follow along with what I'm doing next. So please make sure you add these two. Don't think, oh, well, don't worry about it. It'll come up again later or I'll do that later. Make sure you do these next two now. They're even more important than all of these toolbars we set up because they're going to be shortcuts that we use constantly. And you might think you're using them, but they're actually not. So let's make sure we set them up properly now. We're going to go into Windows and then Preferences, this one here, and then down into Shortcuts, which is this one here. We're going to set up two very important shortcuts. The first one is Group. SketchUp by default doesn't have a Make Group automatic shortcut, which is crazy to me because you want to be grouping objects all the time so that they stay together and don't get stuck. So what we're going to do is once we type in Group, go down to Edit, Make Group, and then in the Add Shortcut tab, so click in here first, we're going to do Control G. Then we click on the plus button, and that means it is now assigned. So from now on, whenever we want to make a group, we can do Control G to turn that into a group, and you'll see me using that all the time when we do a demo in a second. The second one we want to do is called Hide Rest of Model, which is this one over here. So it says View, Component, Edit, Hide Rest of Model. And that's going to be incredibly useful for when you're trying to look inside a group and get to some specific thing without your whole project getting in your way, and then you've got to keep zooming to be able to see what you're looking for. Basically, it allows you to isolate just the thing that you've entered. So just the group that you want to look at, just the object you're currently editing, you'll be able to hide everything else. It makes life so much easier having this command. And the shortcut I like to use for this one is colon. This one here, semicolon, colon, it's the same button. So then same thing, click on plus, and that will assign it over there. So View, Component, Edit, Hide Rest of Model. All you have to do to bring that up is just type in hide into the filter up there, and then we're adding colon as the shortcut for that one. Click OK, and we are done. So that is our setup. So what we want to do now is just go through some of the more basic commands, everything you need to know to get yourself started. The first thing is the selection tool. So selection tool, as you might have guessed, very similar to AutoCAD. We've got a right to left and a left to right so that we can make different types of selections, and we're just clicking and dragging in order to make our selection. The selection tool is also very much like the escape button in AutoCAD. So say for example, we're inside here. If I want to stop drawing rectangles, I can't just press the escape command and I'm going to keep accidentally drawing rectangles here forever. What I need to do is press spacebar, which will take me back up to my selection tool. So spacebar is what you want to use to finish your commands as well. So it's not just a matter of selecting things, it's also your way to stop doing what you're doing as well. So spacebar for your selection is how you're going to do that. The commands are pretty straightforward for SketchUp. So when we want to start drawing lines, we type in L for line. L for line is going to allow us to start drawing our lines. And we can see down here, because we've added our measurement area, we're going to be able to be quite accurate with what we're doing. So while I've still got the line active, if I lock it to the green axis by just hovering over there, and I'm going to type in 5,000 for 5 meters, then I'm going to come across this way, and if I just hover it over the red axis, that's going to mean we're coming in this direction, in this plane. So I'm going to do, let's go 7,500 this time, which is going to go back there. And then if I hover it back to here, and I can see if I hover it back to that point, it's going to show me that it's snapping back to that plane there, and it's going perpendicular, and then I can go back here to this point. Once I have a complete outline with my line tool, L for line, that will then turn it into a plane, which I can do some more editing with. For example, now that I've got my traced around rectangle, I can simply type in P for push and pull, P for push and pull, And if I hover my mouse over there and it starts to go all spotty, it means it's ready to be extruded. I can click on it and I can pull that upwards and turn that into a box. If I type in a number, once again, if I type in 1,000, I can make that a 1 meter box. Click on spacebar to go back to our selection, and now we can see that we've got that finished box. So it's quite intuitive to go from one stage to the next, and these are the most common tools that you'll use. It'll be the selection, it'll be the line tool, and then there'll be the push-pull tool. And we've got a few others we can play with as well. Let's go ahead and rotate around so we can see what we're doing. To rotate, all we're doing is clicking the scroll wheel, and this brings up the orbit tool without having to actually change what we're doing. So we'll see orbit is down here. If I hover over that, O is the command to bring up orbit. However, if I want to just orbit quickly and then go back to doing what I'm doing, I can just click on the scroll wheel on my mouse, and that will allow me to orbit freely, much faster. Okay, so let's go over the top of our little box that we've got here. And what we're going to do is use a tape measure. Tape measure is useful, yes, of course, we can actually measure something. So we know that it was 7,500 and by 5,000, or 5 meters by 7.5 meters. We did that before, we drew that, so we know that's accurate. But more importantly, something that we would be doing a lot of is using our tape measure to set up guides. So let's say, for example, what I want to do is I want to make a hole inside this box here, and I know that hole is going to be specific dimensions away from the edges. So with my tape measure, I can click on an edge and I can start dragging along that red axis. And let's say our hole is going to be 2 meters in from the edge. So 2,000, we type in there and press enter. That's made a guide for us. And then there's going to be another one on the other side coming back this way, also 2 meters. So type in 2,000, press enter. There's going to be another one coming down from the top. This one is going to be 1 meter. And there's going to be another one in here. This one is also going to be 1 meter. Beautiful. And now if we click our scroll wheel to orbit, we can see that we've got some guides over the top at exact dimensions. And this is very useful in SketchUp, because if anything that you bring in from your import doesn't work, you can just make guides from known points in space, just like I did there, a meter from here, meter from there, 2 meters from here, 2 meters from there. And that gives you something that we can now draw lines over. So let's look at that together. So if I click on my pencil or hit L for line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around, just clicking in these intersection points of my guides. And then we can see what it's done is it has created a new face for me. It's actually split the faces. I've got this existing outside face and I've got the inside face. So the line, if it's intersecting on an existing plane, allows us to split it into new faces. The beauty of that is we can push this all the way through and make a hole or make a window. So we hit P for push pull. What I'm going to do is hover over this one here. I'm going to push it through, and then I'm not actually clicking anything yet. What I want to do is I'm going to hover down and bring my mouse over until it says on face. On face is what we're looking for, which means it's locked and snapped into the face on the other side. So when we click through, it has made an opening for us. And if I scan through there, I can see my opening has gone all the way through. My push-pull tool means that if I decide later, actually, the header up here needs to be a little bit lower down, I can once ahead go in that point there and pull it over. Or if either sides of this window frame need to come in a little bit, I can pull them in as well. I can make new guides and I can push and pull to that specific point too. You'll find that it really is quite intuitive. So let's pull this over. We've got a new guide a meter over, and I'm going to head and P for push pull, bring that over, and I'm going to snap it to that guide. And now I've made my window a meter narrower over this dimension here. So that's our guides and our push-pull, which is going to be the bulk of what we're doing inside SketchUp, because we can make guides for where we know stuff is based on our plan, based on our measurements that we've done in AutoCAD, and then we can push-pull the objects, and then we can take holes out of them as we need to. That's going to be a lot of the things. Something else we're going to need to know how to do is move stuff. So let's say I want to move this whole object here. Now when I click on a face, it's only grabbing one face at a time. So what we're going to need to do now is set up a group. So we said before we're going to make group Control G. So let's have a go at doing that now. I'm going to left to right select so that I don't get any of these guides. If I right to left select, it's going to grab all the guides as well. Exactly the same as AutoCAD. Left to right means we're only grabbing what's inside the box. So now that everything is selected, I'm going to hit Control G, and that is now turned that into a group. We can see that's a group because if I click once, it's going to select absolutely everything, which is perfect because we want to move the whole object, not just one face. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select it. We're going to hit M for move, and then we're going to grab a corner. And what I want to do is I'm going to take this corner here and put it over to this guide point that we have there. So it's going to go up and across. So click on that corner, and I'm going to go up to that guide point over there. And that's now where it has moved to. So we can see it's gone up and it has gone across. Perfect. Another thing we can do with our move tool is make a copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my group again. I'm going to hit M for move. And then what I want to do is I'm going to make a copy by copying from this point here to this point that we've got in our guides over here. So let's go ahead and select it. And all I'm going to do is toggle Control. So I hit Control on my keyboard and it's going to allow me to make as many copies as I would like now. Then if I want to do it again, I'm already in M for move, so I don't need to hit M again. I'm just going to select again, hit Control again, and it will now allow me to make copies. And of course, I can type in a dimension as well. So if I want to type in 7,000, that'll copy it to that exact distance for me. Another very useful tool is to copy an array of objects. So let's go ahead, and what I want to do is I want to copy this all the way down to this point here, and I want to have 3 more units in between that. So let's say, for example, we want M for move. Over here, I'm going to click on my corner, Control to make a copy, and I'm going to pull this all the way over here. Let's just go ahead and click that, and then I'm going to hit / this one here, and then I'm going to type in 3. There we go. And so what it's done is it's divided the amount of space in between those by 3, which means it's going to put 2 more objects in there. If I do Control Z and I do that again, I'll put in 4 and we'll see the difference. So Control to make a copy, click over here, / 4, and there we go. Put more objects in this time. So it's dividing the amount of space that you put in there, and it's done by 4. This would be really, really useful if you're doing something like building a staircase, because then you only have to make the bottom step, you copy that bottom step all the way up to the very last tread, and then you divide it by the number of steps that it has, and it builds the entire staircase for you. Very, very useful. Same thing if you wanted to make your own brick feature wall inside SketchUp. Let's say you've got all of the bricks sorted down here because you did the first brick and then you copied them all the way along. Then you copy them upwards and offset them so that you've got a nice running bond along there. And then all you would need to do is select all of them, go from the bottom to the top of the wall and split the difference from the amount of courses it has. And then you've got a nice feature brickwork wall there inside SketchUp. So using the copy and divide tool, which is just the / after you've done a copy, is very, very useful. Let's go ahead and clean this up a bit now. So what I'm going to do is do Control A, and I'm just going to deselect just this one here. So I hit Shift on my keyboard, and that allows me to deselect just one object. There we go, nice and easy. I can also do a deselect holding down the Shift key, and that will take out or add in whatever's in there. So Control A, deselect this one only, holding Shift, there we go, and I'm going to delete everything else, including the guides. Let's just go back to having this in space here. Perfect. There we go, that's still hovering over there. The next command we're going to use is the rotate tool. Rotate is Q for rotate. Don't know how Q and rotate relate to each other, but it is Q for rotate. Maybe because the Q shape kind of looks like this compass once you start drawing the compass, and it has a little tail coming off of it like this guy here, makes it look like a Q. That's how I remember it anyway. So rotate is pretty straightforward. We can, of course, rotate our object around itself on an axis. We can rotate sideways, and you'll notice that the color of my compass is what's changing the direction, and we can rotate this way as well. So all I'm really doing is I'm just hovering over a face, which is the direction that I want it to rotate. So if I want it to rotate along this axis, I'm hovering over this face because I want it to go this way. This axis, I hover over this face and it's red, and that's going to allow me to go this way. A really easy way to remember it is the color of the compass is the color of the axis it'll rotate on. So red is this one, which means it'll rotate about this axis. Green is this one, which will rotate about this axis. And blue is the top one, which is up there, which allows you to rotate. Nice and straightforward. So typically what we'll do is we'll hold down Q for rotate. We'll go to that face. We'll click on one point, click the other point, and then I'm just going to rotate it upwards. And you can specify the angle, of course. So in our case, I want to rotate it up by 90 degrees. I type in 90, press enter, and that has now rotated upwards. And this is looking more and more like a wall with a window inside it. Q for rotate works exactly the same as our move as well. So I can make a copy of this while I'm doing my rotation. So let's go Q down into this corner over here, hit Control, type in 90, and there we go. I've got both the original and the rotated version inside there. Let's have a look at a few more. So we've got our rectangle tool, pretty straightforward. It's a rectangle, so we can just start drawing rectangles in space there. Likewise, we can use known dimensions. So if we click one point and then we start typing in, I can go 1000. Oh, that's gone off of its axis there. So what I need to do is just make sure it's not snapping to anything. Perfect. Now we can see if I was going here, it was going to start snapping out of place. If I click that, we'll see that it's getting a little bit funky, not doing what we wanted to do there. So I'll go again, make sure it's not snapping to anything. Perfect. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 1000, comma. So unlike AutoCAD where we use tab, this time we use comma. And then let's go by 5000. And there we go. We've got our exact dimensions of that one there for our rectangle. Very straightforward. Push-pull, as we know, P for push-pull. We've got E for eraser. So eraser is very, very useful when we've got overlapping stuff. So let's say, for example, we've got a drawing which has lots of overlapping lines like this, and we're trying to extrude just the outer perimeter of this. We don't want all of these individual lines coming in. So if I try and extrude just this whole thing, it's getting stuck on all these individual objects and I can't do the whole bit. So what I need to do is use my eraser tool so I can clean all of this stuff out of here and extrude just the outer edge. So we go E for eraser, and then I'm going to go through and click out all of these lines here, and this allows us to separate these faces back out. And we see as the line gets thicker, that means it's no longer a full rectangle, and so it won't be part of the extrusion. So let's clean all of these out nice and easy. Perfect. And so now if I go push-pull, it allows me to take the whole shape. Very, very useful for us. So the eraser tool, particularly if you're going to import your drawings from AutoCAD rather than doing it manually in SketchUp, there's going to be a lot of cleaning up you'll have to do just to make sure things are working nice and easy for you. Another useful one for us is offset. F for offset allows us to bring in an extrusion of this. So let's say, for example, this was a perimeter of our building and we wanted to bring it in by 270 because that's the size of the blockwork masonry. We can now extrude just this outer wall that we've got out here. And then there we have the whole exterior wall pulled up in one go by using the offset. Very, very straightforward. As we said, O is for orbit, but typically we just use the click of the scroll wheel. We've got Z for zoom, but usually we just scroll with our scroll wheel, and we can do that as well. But this one down here sometimes is very useful, a zoom window, which means we can zoom down to a specific point. So typically I'll use that one over here rather than Z for zoom, because Z for zoom I can just use by scrolling my scroll wheel. A for arc, pretty straightforward. We get what an arc is going to look like. We go from this point here to that point there. We can go ahead and pull an arc out of there so we can have some sort of arch. You'll notice by default that it's quite jagged in SketchUp, and so we actually need to fix that. So by default it's making it very simple so that it runs really quickly, but we want the aesthetics to be looking good, and our house is not that massive that we need to worry about it. So if we hit A for arc again, it'll open up this sides dialog down the bottom here. And so if instead of 12, we just start typing, that'll replace that. So I'm going to up that to 100, and then I do my arc again, and we'll notice it is a lot smoother around that edge there. The same thing happens for circles. So if we go C for circle, number of sides is currently 24, and depending on how big we go, we might not notice it, but you'll see if we go out big enough, we're going to have these faces, these edges to our circle. Not good. So C for circle again, type in 100, press enter, and then if we bring that out, a lot smoother, so much smoother. Right, so that is the bulk of our commands. Of course, there are plenty more that I want you to experiment with and play around, have a look, see what these different ones do, play around with shadow and times of day, play around with the display settings, having a look at some elevation sections, all that sort of stuff. We'll go through some more techniques together as we go down the line, but I just want to show you the basics now before we get stuck into our demo. All right, let's have a look at how to bring in a drawing from AutoCAD as one of our options to start building our house. And we want to bring this into Sketchup. Now, the first thing we need to do is clean everything up and delete everything. So what would happen if we took this drawing as is, our beautiful plan drawing that we made for the first assignment, if we took that into SketchUp in full, what would happen is we'd have lots and lots and lots of intersecting lines, and we'd spend much more time than is necessary trying to go through with our little eraser, delete, 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 and be able to extrude just the bits we want. So in order to save time on the back end, we're going to do a little bit of extra work on the front end. Where we want to get to is something that looks a little bit more like this. So if we remove absolutely everything except for the walls, that is going to make your life as easy as possible. I have seen some students successfully, what they might do is they might keep some stairs if they've got some more complex lines like this for some changes in level or some steps like that, or they've got some sweeping arcs which are a little bit more complicated to do in SketchUp. They might keep some of that stuff, but everything else really we can just do by using the line tool, using the tape measure tool to connect points in space from one side to the other. So really, unless you've got anything that is a sweeping arc like this, that's going to be a little bit harder to do in SketchUp, I recommend just walls only. And so what you can do is, of course, turn off the walls layer, delete everything, and then turn the walls layer back on. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. So again, turn your walls layer off because that should all just be on one layer by itself. Delete everything, turn your walls layer back on, and then you should have something like this. Now, typically what I would do is go back through and also delete all of the layers as well, because sometimes depending on how you import it, the layers can come through into SketchUp too, which can make things a little bit more complicated for you. So you can delete all the layers as well. But for now, this is fine. What we're going to do is we're going to do this as a save as, and we can see I've already done that for this one, but let's go do that together now. What we're going to do to make it nice and clear is whatever your start extension is for your file name, add afterwards underscore mod for SketchUp, mod SketchUp, and then underscore lines only. This will make it very, very clear so that we don't accidentally go and use this later for something else. So say, for example, we accidentally submit this as our drawing for assignment 2. Obvious, it shouldn't look like that, and it's going to go to PDF. But just in case we don't want to go saving over the top of our existing file accidentally after we've gone ahead and deleted everything. We really don't want that. So before we do anything else, do a file save as, save it as a normal AutoCAD file, but add in that extension afterwards with mod for SketchUp and your lines only, just to make it nice and clear. So that's it. All we need is our line work for the walls. Walls only. That's it. We're going to go ahead and bring that into SketchUp now. So back into SketchUp, we're going to go to File, New, and start from fresh. And what we're going to do is make sure we're on the correct template. So we can go New from Template, Architectural Millimeters, and there we have it. Beautiful. Glad we did that. The big giveaway for those of you that didn't pick it up is the color of the sky. If we're not seeing that nice gray, subtle gradation of the sky, we know that we're probably either in inches or we're looking at some small scale modeling. So to check that again, you go new to template and then architectural and millimeters, double click on that one, and that'll make sure you're in the right one. We can go ahead and delete this person first, select them, press delete, and we're then going to import our drawing into SketchUp. What we're going to do is go up to File and then Import. Navigate to where you saved that. There's my mod SketchUp lines only, and then we're going to come down here and go to options, and instead of model units we're going to go into millimeters to make sure we're doing the right thing. We're still going to have to do another scale after that anyway, but we want to make sure we're using millimeters when we work. So click on OK. After that, click on import. Don't worry about that, click close, and we should see that it has brought our house plan in. Okay, so now what we want to do is scale. If I grab our drawing here, hit S for scale, we'll see that if I grab it in this corner and we look down here, it's scaling by a percentage. So if I'm to come down and I see that it's at 0.50, that's 50% or half of the current scale. 1 is 100%, so no change. And then we go upwards from there, let's say 125, that would be 125%. So 25% bigger than it is currently, 1.25. What we need to do is figure out how much we're out by. So you might bring your drawing in and it might be perfect. It might already be millimeters to millimeters and it came in perfectly from AutoCAD. But I'm going to wager there'll be quite a few of you that didn't work out so perfectly. So now we're going to look at how to fix it. If this drawing, we don't know it is correct, but AutoCAD we do, then that means we need to jump back into AutoCAD. So let's go over to AutoCAD. What we're looking for is a known dimension of our longest line. For this particular drawing, the longest line is this back wall here. The reason we use the longest line is because if we're going to scale against that, there's less room for error. So this wall is 19.603. I'm going to go ahead and put that into a calculator before I forget it. 19.603. Okay, and then let's go back into SketchUp and let's go ahead and check that. Fingers crossed it's right, but I don't think it will be. Okay, 6861, so we're definitely out, and we're at least 2 times out. 16, we're almost 3 times out there. Okay, so we know we've got a problem. So 6861, we'll remember that. We'll go back to our calculator. That was the known dimension. Now I'm going to divide it by the unknown one, which is divide 6861. We click OK, and then we've got that is the amount we're out by. Okay, and that's roughly what we were thinking anyway. We thought it was 2, almost 3 times it was out by, so that's looking good. We know we need to scale it up by that amount. So if we remember that number, 2.8572, that's how much we're going to scale by. And you can do the same thing. You're just dividing the number that you do know, i.e. that number from AutoCAD. We're dividing that number by the number that it comes in SketchUp. In some cases, your answer might be smaller, which means your drawing needs to get smaller. But if it's bigger, like mine is, it means it needs to get bigger. Okay, so let's scale this by 2.8572. 2.8572. Let's click our drawing, S for scale, 2.8572, and then we click, sorry, I got that wrong, 2.8572, enter. Okay, that looks like it's scaled by 2 and a bit times, almost 3, which is good. And now our final check, we remember it was 19.603. If we go out to here, 19.604 to the millimeter, pretty bloody close. I'm very happy with that. And now we should have our drawing to scale. So that's the final thing you'll do after that step. Once you've imported, check to scale, and then if it is scaled already, you can move on to the next step. If it isn't scaled, you just follow those steps we went through back there, divide the number from AutoCAD by the number from SketchUp, and use that to scale your drawing. Now the next step we need to take on board is exploding this. So at the moment, it's not editable. We can't do anything with this, so we need to explode it. What we're going to do is right click on a line. So sometimes you might need to zoom in to be able to right click on it. There we go. That's nice and easy. And we're going to go up here to explode. Once we've done that, we should be able to select individual lines. Much better. Perfect. Don't stress if this does take a little bit of time for you. Depending on the speed of your computer, it might take a little bit longer than mine just did to explode it. But the thing you're looking for afterwards is individual lines. All right, now that we've got individual lines, we're going to start extruding these upwards. Now, if your drawing is correct, what will happen is all we need to do is click, delete one line, press L for our line tool, and then put that line back in, and that will allow Sketchup to see that geometry. So what it'll do is effectively it's going to join all the lines together. So they're already joined together technically. Sketchup just can't see it that way yet. So I'll do it again. Delete this one. L for line tool, connect from that line there, that point there to this point here, and now all of a sudden we can see that as a geometry, which means we can do our pushing and pulling and bring everything up to the appropriate heights. So once you've got your first one all joined together like this and it has changed to the color white, and if we hover our push pull button over the top we get those lovely blue dots, what we're going to do first is turn it into a group. Turning it into a group is probably the most important step in everything we're going to do here, because it means you can go back in and edit it later. If you don't make things into groups and you start having objects inside that group, for example, if I put a long bench inside of this garage space here, then I put a roof over the top of it, I put some cabinetry behind here in this living space, I put a fridge inside here, I put a bench top inside that scullery there, and then I start to add more and more objects in, we'll find that they all stick together and I can't edit them individually anymore. And it is the number one cause of stress for students and pulling their hair out. So please, 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 this is why I mentioned it at the start of this video. Control G for group is so important because it is our number one step before we do anything. So what we're going to do is, yes, we can go ahead and select like this and then hold shift and deselect, but there is a faster method to do that. So once we've made a plane like this, the very next step we do, once we can see it, is we double click inside it. That selects everything for us, and then we hit Control G. Okay, so let's do that again. Control Z to undo it. Now that I've got my plane here, I'm going to double click it. That will turn all of the lines around it blue. Control G. That then turns it into a group. Most important step. Now I can double click inside the group and I can do my push pull as normal, and that will pull everything up for us. Let's go ahead and type in 3000. That is our floor to ceiling height inside there, and we are set, good to go, and that's pulled everything up for us. What we'll then do is we'll go around and continue to do that all around our drawing until we have pulled everything up. Now again, double click, Control G, double click inside the group. Then what we can do as another hack to make things even faster, whatever your last push or pull was, if it was say 3 meters, 3000 mil, if I double click without doing anything else, double click, it will remember what that last move was and will pull it up by the same amount, which is going to save you a lot of time. Double click outside of the group, press escape to get out of that, and then that will allow us to get out. So we can very, very quickly go through and do all of these walls together, because all we need to do is follow those quick shortcuts. So delete the line, draw across the line, space bar, double click, Control G, double click again, P for push, double click, and escape to get out. That is it. Let's do it one more time together. We're going to delete a line, L, across, space bar, double click, Control G, double click, P, double click, space bar to get out, and we're out. That's it. And we do that process over and over to get all of our walls. What I want to do now is show what happens when a wall doesn't work quite successfully, and we need to figure out what is going astray. So let's say, for example, you can't see it, but in AutoCAD, we've got a line that doesn't quite go all the way to where it should be. So from the naked eye, that looks like it's going all the way there. And what we do is we delete this line over here and we say, okay, straightforward, do the same technique Chris told me. I go over here and, oh, what? Nothing's happened. It doesn't turn into white. I can't double click inside anything. Uh-oh, what do I do? Now the way to get around this is to start doing what we call triangulating. So if you go at the start point and we go from one corner to another corner, and that turns white, we know there's no issues down here. We can then go across this point here. Yep, no issues down there. No issues down here. No issues down there, perfect. No issues here. No issues here. And then if we try and go across here, what happens? This is finding our error for us, and we go, there we go, there is our troublemaker, and we can go ahead and delete that one. We press L for line, go across, and voila, we've got all of the bits that we needed, and we can then go back in with our eraser and delete all of those extra lines that we don't need inside of there. Go around nice and quick, and once we're done with that, we're going to double click, Control G, double click, P, double click, and that's it. So whenever you find that a wall is not quite working out for you, you just use the triangulation method to figure out where the hole is, and then once you've got it all working, erase a tool to get it all, and then it's the same steps as before. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to add in some cabinetry that we've got here, which sits inside this space for the kitchen. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the other side of the island. So L for over here, we got double click, Control G, double click, beautiful. All right, we're going to have an island which sits at 900 above floor level inside this space here. Now we know from our plan, if I jump back into AutoCAD, let's go to our ground floor, that this thing sits inside this space. So we've got this little bench space, we've got a chair that can sit up on top of that. That's that wall that I just brought up, wall on the other side, and behind there is a nook. Maybe we put a fridge, maybe we put something else inside there, but we've got this mat here with this opening for the bench top. So we need to build that in. Now this is a very, very straightforward technique. All we need is our tape measure tool and a line tool. So what I'm going to do is, once again, same method I showed before, I'm going to click along this line here, drag it over. That's going to give us our line in that point there. I'm going to go another one here. I'm going to scroll around to this side, another one there. We'll scroll over to here, another one there, and voila, wouldn't you know it, we've got our rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and go rectangle, R for rectangle, like this. Then I'm going to double click group. I'm going to double click, pull that up by 900, and that's going to give us our bench. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay, and that's going to sit in there nicely. Then I've got this space over here. Now I can very quickly put a rectangle in here, double click, group it, double click, but what's going to happen is I'm going to have this line here, that seam, and when we get into making our perspectives later, that's going to be an issue for us with materials. It's a line there that we don't need to see. So the better technique to do, if I go ahead and delete that, is to actually isolate this guy here and add another line in so that we can extrude it out past here and it's all one geometry. Let's take a look at that. First thing I want to show you, and as a reminder, is at the start of this video we made a hide the rest of model shortcut. Now is when we would want to use it, when we've got a bunch of stuff in the way and we need to be able to see what's going on here. If you remember, we made that colon. So press the colon key, that allows us to hide all of the stuff that's currently out of the way. And we go, okay, I can see now that if I were to make a line going straight up here, that would allow me to just extrude this face over. So to do that, what do I need? T for tape measure is going to allow me to make a guide. I can go up there and then colon, beautiful. Now I can see what I'm doing. L for line, go over to this face. Cool. Now I should be able to go P. Yep. That allows me to just click this face here. I'm going to start dragging, but then I'm going to turn on colon. Let's move a little further away. Colon, perfect. And we're just going to go to this point here. Spacebar to finish, double click out of it. And wouldn't you know, we've now got our cabinetry without a seam in it. Perfect. Now let's say we want to edit this even further and add some nice, lovely shadow lines for the kickstand underneath and for the top of the bench top and maybe even for the doors themselves. First thing, let's go ahead and add a groove for the bench top. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click inside this face here, hide the rest of the model just so we can work on this one isolated by itself by clicking colon. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some lines down from here. It's 40 mil bench top, so type in 40, and then let's say our tolerance is 10 mil inside there, so we're going to have a 10 mil groove running here. Then I'm going to go R for rectangle and go along here up to that edge there. Then P for push. I'm going to push this inside by 20 mil, the thickness of my doors in the cabinetry. Great, so now we've got a nice little shadow line there. I'm going to come up on my kickstand underneath here. I'm going to come up by 100. So once again, I don't need to do a rectangle this time because it's just one line. We'll push the whole thing in. So we go across there, P for push, bring that in by 20, beautiful. And then what I want to do is evenly split this cabinetry. So I want a line to go from this line to this line. Can you remember what we do to do that? I think you can. So let's have a line going from there to there. Then we're going to click the line, M for move, Control to copy. We're going to go from one side to the other side, and then we do /, which is our divide. And let's go ahead. We've seen in the picture that there are 5 panels, 5 door panels on here. So we type in 5, we click OK, and that gives us our 5 doors inside there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to grab each one of these doors and we are going to copy them over, and just to create a gap in between, which will look really nice when we're making our perspectives later because we've got realistic looking lines. I'm going to go 5 mil for our tolerance inside there. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and push each one of these elements in. So again, because 20 mil we already used before, all I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and double click inside each of these ones here. Beautiful. So now we have a kitchen cupboard, bench top, and all of the doors, the kickstand. This is looking pretty realistic with how the actual product of the house would work. You will notice that it's all pretty straightforward. It's exactly the same tools over and over again. We've got our tape measure, we've got our lines to start dividing it up. We are pushing and pulling, we're moving and copying, but other than that, it is not too complicated. And so you use those same techniques over and over again to start to fill in all of the gaps and bits and pieces. So you go all the way around your house, you build all of the elements that you need to see, and then you start to add in more detail. So let's say, for example, I want to put in the arches that are on the underside here. Pretty straightforward, but a little bit more complex than some of the stuff that we've seen already. So let's go ahead and build that now. So first thing is just to build this structure around it. Let's go ahead and pull that all the way up. Naughty Chris. Double click first, group, perfect. Now we pull that upwards, colon, so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now we've got this space where our arch is going to go inside of that block work. If I come over to here, we'll see what I'm talking about in the drawing set. We've got these arches that sit inside here and some lovely vegetation in there. Back to SketchUp, tape measure, 115 mil upwards from there, 115. Beautiful. This is going to be the bottom of our arch. Now we just need to figure out how tall the actual arch is itself. So we go back into AutoCAD and I'm going to figure out where the side of the arch is. So if I go PL out from here, and that's just going to give us our line across. And then we'll see as we're following along our arch here, the arch starts to turn into a straight line at this exact point here. So that is the height of our arch, and it's 600, nice and easy to remember. So back into SketchUp, we're going to go 600 up from that point there. 600, beautiful. That gives us our height. Then we just need to make our arch here. Beautiful, and double click, lovely. And then we just need to build in the undersides of this one here. Around, bottom, back up, excellent. Same technique, Control G for group. We're going to double click inside there first. We're going to push this out to the depth of the wall. And did that go all the way? Yes, it did. Excellent. Now all we need to do, if we know these are the same, hopefully they are, hopefully I drew them that way, we can just go ahead and copy these over. Lovely, lovely. And of course we can use the copy divide tool as well. and then there's one more sitting inside there. That one's slightly different, so we'll just take this one this time. And M for move, control. Excellent, cool. And then we can build that one over there separately, and then we can put the roof over the top of that. Looking good. All right, so that is how we put together that geometry. What if we wanted to put a window into an existing wall? So rather than there being a full opening like this one, which goes all the way down to the ground level, all the way up to the ceiling, because it's got a big double door slider. Let's say there's just a window inside a wall like there would be on this one here. Now, if we've been doing this properly, each will be in individual groups. So say, for example, I've already done this one here. Double click, group, double click, all the way, beautiful. These will be individual groups. Now, if I want to put a hole inside here, I could go ahead and try and join this one over to here, but that's not going to help me when I want to try and put an opening in here because I still have that seam there. They're not actually joined together. So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can cut this one out of here and paste it into the other group. So I can go from one group to another. So double click inside my group, triple click so that it grabs everything, Control X to cut it. And then what I'm going to do is double click inside this second group, go up to edit, and then paste in place this one up here. And what it'll do is it'll bring it back into that group. So now we can see that these are all part of the same group. I can then go ahead and pull this face that we have over here over to this one, and voila, I can see that that is now a softened line. So I can go through here, grab each one of these around underneath and go over the other side. Perfect. So now this is all part of one wall, and I can go ahead and cut that window out from where it belongs. What we need to do first, however, is to make our guidelines so that we know where the window is going to go. So if we undo that, what we can do is we know this is the breadth of our window. So we can go this way along here and another one over this side here. Perfect. So now that we know is our window placement, then we can go ahead and follow those same steps again. Pull this one over here. Go ahead and delete all of those lines around. And don't forget the bottom one as well. Under there, perfect. So now that's all part of the house. We can go ahead and make some guidelines vertically using the edge of the wall and just bringing them into where we put those lines before. And that gives us our vertical lines. Then from AutoCAD, we know the heights horizontally and vertically. We can look back to that elevation. So let's say that this one is 1100 above the ground level, and then the actual window itself goes up by another 1200. Perfect. So then very similar process to what we've done plenty of times before is we've put our rectangle in that space. We're going to push until it says on face. We can see it there on face. And now that gives us our opening. What we then do is include some more details about the actual window itself. So rather than just leaving this open, we can go ahead and add in some framing, and we can add in some extra mullions as well if we want to. For example, we could add in all of these mullions framework for the individual panes, and then we've got 6 panes in there if we want to. For now, let's just go ahead and have a look at how to add 2 panes into there. Pretty straightforward. We'll do a fixed one first, and then we can do another one after that. Okay, so let's keep it simple for ourselves. We're just going to go to the midpoint of the wall, and again, let's go to this point here and do the same thing over the other side. That one to there. And then we don't need the top one because we've already got enough of that. So I'm going to go from that point there, got to zoom in so we can see it. And I'm going to go over to this point that we've got in there. Perfect. So that is where our glazing would sit. But of course we've got some framing on top of that as well. So I'm going to make my life easy for myself. I'm just going to offset this, offset it by 40 millimeters as our frame. Then I'm going to pull the frame by 50. Then I'm going to move the glazing in by 25, but I'm going to copy it rather than pull it. If I pull it, it's going to do something weird like this. It's not going to work. It's going to add an extra geometry to it. So to make my life easier, I'm just going to make a copy, and I'm going to put it at the new midpoint of that framing that we've got inside there, which is our little blue dot, the midpoint. Then what I can do is just go back over to the other side and delete that other panel out, delete, and now I've got just my glazing sitting inside my framing. So that is a fixed frame window. We want to add 2 planes. So this is a good example of what happens when you don't split up your groups. Now if I want to move this guy out of the way, what's going to happen is every time I try and double click and grab all parts of the model, it's grabbing everything. I can't actually just grab that individual face now. I could one by one push and pull these over, but I'm never going to be able to get past that frame again. So we've made an issue for ourselves there. What we're going to do is we're going to undo this and do it as a group so we can figure out how to make 2 of these. So this is the issue we're trying to avoid. If we don't use groups, this will happen. So let's just undo all of this stuff that we've done inside here. Cool. Then I'm going to click out of my group. I still need those guides, so Control Y to redo that last guide. Should come back now, Control Y. Okay, must have gone too far back in my undoing. That's fine, we can just make it again. Beautiful. So this time we're going to do it separately from the group. So instead of double clicking inside the group and putting it in there, I'm going to do it separately. So now I can do my rectangle again. Oop, in there. There we go. And of course, I'm going to group this now that it's separate. Double click inside there. Do my offset again by 40. Pull that guy out by 50. Pull this one in, M for move, C for copy to that center point. Go to the back, spacebar, delete. Now we've got our window. Okay, now it's in a separate group. What I can do is I can scale this in one direction and then I can add a second one behind it. Double click in it, then I'm going to go isolate so I can see what I'm doing. Control A, S for scale, and then what I want to do is just grab onto this box over here and I'm just going to come to the midpoint so I can see it snapping to that midpoint there. There we go, escape to finish, colon, cool. So that gives us one window, and then I can go ahead and I can make a copy of this, M for move, Control to copy, pull this one over the backside over here, and of course this is going to sit a little bit past that one there. So M, grabbing that point there onto there, and now we've got enough room to see where we are. Excellent. Now midpoint has made that not quite right because there shouldn't be overlap on this side. However, for the purpose of illustration, that's pretty good. If you wanted to, you could make that even stronger, isolate that, grab everything, and then scale it a little more accurately so that it comes just past the midpoint. But for now, I think as an exercise, this is pretty good. That still demonstrates that inside the cavity of this wall, the opening that we made has got the 2 different windows. And it's the same process to make more windows. So if you were to go back into CAD and we wanted to make this full suite of window panes that we've got here, then we can just divide it once again. We know the dimensions. We can figure out how wide this one is, how wide this one is, how wide this one is. We put our tape measure guidelines in there and we just make individual windows to set inside of there. Now in reality, the windows would also sit inside a subframing there. You wouldn't just have the panes, there would be another set of frames inside there. But again, for purposes of illustration, for showing this quickly, this is pretty good. You can add more information yourself in as you get more experience in SketchUp and as you want to layer more into your model. The more you layer, of course, the more you have to show, the more detail, and the more you can demonstrate that you understand how it works. This is a basic level, and then you can push above that in your own assignment. Once you've done everything on the ground floor that you need to show in your model, it would be time to add the slabs underneath, above, the walls above, and then a roof on top of that. It's a pretty straightforward process. Let's say I've got a rectangle which is going to sit underneath here and go all the way over to this side. Here it is, because that's a pool inside there. That'll be different. That won't be part of the main slab. I can then, of course, double click, group, double click, push down, 200 mil for my slab, and I'm sorted, ready to go. We can see we caused an error there because this rectangle is intersecting with that rectangle. No harm, no foul. We can just go ahead and pull this one out here and go ahead and delete those extra lines that we've got in there as well. Delete, delete. Happy days. Click out of there. Now we've got our full slab. That's the first one. First one's the easiest one because it's just sitting underneath there. As per usual, if we want to add more to the slab, we can come along to this edge here. We can find a point where it's intersecting. In this case, we've got that same issue, but let's say, for example, when you had a look underneath here, this was all clean and smooth. Yours looked more like this. Whoop. There we go. If that was the issue for you and you wanted the slab to just continue underneath this brickwork here, but not on the other side, T for tape measure, we're going to grab a vertical line here. We're going to make sure that it's on the red axis. We're going to hold down shift so that it locks to that red axis. And then we're just going to hover it down to the face that's down in there to make sure that it's sitting on that face, which is perfect. L for line from the bottom up to the top there where it intersects. Be careful because there's lots of stuff going on here. P for push or pull, and then we can come out to that point there for the brickwork. So very easy to just add extra parts to the slab. All we're doing is using our lines from the tape measure, line tool, and then pulling it more. It's the same strategy pretty much for the floor above. Now what we can do is, if we think it's going to be pretty close, we can just go ahead and copy. So we can use M and Control, and then we can go ahead and copy that slab. And then we could simply just go along here with our line tool up to that edge there, push this over until it meets the part that we need it to meet. Something like that, that point there. That's pretty straightforward. So some of you will be able to do that and that'll work pretty nice and cleanly for you. Others, you'll just have to start a new slab again, which is the same process. Once again, this is why we use groups. If you hadn't been using groups and these are all just walls, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to make a slab over the top of that. So let's say our slab went all the way across here. You're not going to be able to do that if each of these walls is intersecting, because you wouldn't be able to push it all and pull it all upwards. So this is why from the start I said that grouping was so, so important. So Control G, double click, P to pull it upwards. It's a suspended slab, so it's thicker, 300. There we go. And then we could start to edit that in as necessary. So we could put a line in over here, push it that way, put another line in over here, push it this way, as necessary, as needed. Likewise, if there are holes in the slabs, we treat it exactly the same as there are holes in walls. We push it down, we go to on face, and we make holes in it. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. Likewise, if it's a circle rather than a square hole, or if you've got an arch hole rather than a square hole, you can just go ahead and push that through. Exactly the same strategy. On face. There we go. That's it. So that is your slabs. And then the final step is going to be the roof. The roof is pretty straightforward in the sense that you can do a couple of options. So let's say, for example, this is finished. It's not finished, but let's say we've got a simple hipped roof which comes up to the top here that we need to do. Maybe it's just an A-frame. Yeah, even simpler. Let's just do an A-frame. So we'll say that our midpoint, let's just make a rectangle to find our midpoint more easily. Half a rectangle. Actually, let's make a guide first so that I've got a proper square coming out of here and another one going this way. Cool. Now I can do my half a rectangle. That corner, this corner, we can fillet that off nice and easily, but because we're going to do an A-frame, don't worry about that. Let's find our midpoint. So just to double check, so that should be 4.5. So yeah, that's our midpoint, 4.5. So we know where that is. It's going to be roughly there. All right, so we'll make our guide over to our midpoint. Now what we're looking for is to delete that because we've got our guide. I'm actually going to clean these guides up a little bit so I can see more of what I'm doing. I'm going to come out over there and just delete these ones because it's really important now that I get the right guides. Okay, get this one out as well. That one's part of this guy in here. Doesn't matter, we don't need it for right now. If in doubt, let me just show you. If I double click inside of this, it'll open up the group that it's in, delete it, and then double click out of it. Simple. Okay. What I want to do is I want to find the pitch. So I know where the bottom parts of the house are because it's going to come down and rest over here, and that's how the eaves are going to come out from that point. So I know the bottom part. The harder part is finding the center point, the apex, if you will. So we've got a couple of options. The easiest one is to simply make a copy of our guide and move it upwards. So if we get M for move, Control for copy, and then we just find the known height from our section. So if our section says that the height from the top of wall TOW to the apex is going to be 2 meters, we type in 2 meters and we've got that point there. Once we've got that, we've got a couple of options. We could go ahead and draw a line vertically upwards to that point and then back down over to this edge over here and then back to there, and then we could go ahead and extrude this over and simply get that roof shape there. We could, and I'm going to give you multiple options just in case you guys have got different houses and need to do different techniques. We could go across from here, Q as our rotate, hold down shift to lock it to that angle, go up and then get it until it's going to snap onto that axis. And then once we've got our line selected, M for move, we could move that up to this point here. Making sure that we're following along that same axis. Perfect. That gives us another option, and then we could simply just extrude that downwards to get our thickness of our roof line and pull this out to get the eaves line coming out over there. That's another option. What else could we do? We could go the other way. So we could do a rectangle like this. It's separate because we've got groups below, makes our life so much easier. And for move, I'm just going to move that up to where it intersects here. Then I could just grab the edge over here, hit M for move, and then once that's selected, I can just pull it down to that point there. Then we do the opposite. We extrude it outwards, and then we extrude this face for the eaves. Simple. So a couple of techniques there. The roof is probably the most complicated part of what you're doing, but with those three options, one of them should help you get there, and of course we can help you in class. Other than that, it's pretty much the same techniques over and over again. We're using the tape measure to figure out where things are in space. We're using L to create the lines. We're making sure those lines are all closed over. We then use our push-pull to turn it into a geometry. We can add more lines over the top of it to cut stuff out or to just push stuff in. And then we're making copies and we're moving things around. All pretty straightforward. Hopefully it's making lots of sense to you. In terms of how much you need to build, you want to focus on the areas where you are going to take perspectives from. So in the AIA stream, this is going to be the most important parts of the house in terms of its conceptual quality, the narrative, the special parts of the architecture. In the CM stream, it's the same thing. What's your USB? What is the unique selling proposition? What are the most important parts of the house? And therefore, where do we need to show off the house? You do not need to build the whole house. You need to build the parts that are most important to your perspectives. The caveat is you need to build what you're going to see. If you're going to see it, you need to build it. So just ask yourself, can I make this perspective so that I won't see any of the stuff behind here? Can I take it from an angle where none of the stuff behind me is going to come up? In that case, I don't need to build any of this stuff because it's not going to be part of the shot. So just ask yourself, where do I want to be? What do I want to show? All right, so this is a more developed version further along the line. So you can see here, I definitely haven't built anything that I don't need to be part of the final perspective set. I've just got the main body of the alteration and addition of the house. This is the important part for me, or I believe from my research and analysis, this is the most important bit. So I built all of that stuff. Everything that I need to be able to see from here is what I built and nothing else. Another thing we need to think about is the rules of perspective. Now in the AIA stream, we're going to be making collages, so we need to be able to make sure that we're sticking to these rules. We're not going to be adding people in digitally, we're going to be adding trees and textures and things like that in Photoshop. So this is really important to understand. Now we have what's called a vanishing point in perspective, which means everything is leading back to that one point in space. So we can see the bottom of this wall, even though it's a flat wall, is all lined up. The bottom of the sill of these windows is all lined up. the header up here at top of the windows is all lined up on those arches, and then the top of that slab up there is all going back to the same place. Even the seat in the background behind, you can see each one of these arches is all pointing back to that same point in space, and that's our single vanishing point. The same thing is true of anything we add into the scene. So people should follow that line inside that space. So you can imagine a point in space, and if you want to, set up some guides in Photoshop so that you can see how this actually works. But make sure you're placing people along the same point. So from that point, which comes to you from your lines in SketchUp, you'll see that already. It'll already be there. If you follow it backwards, there's a point in space. If you then pull that outwards, that tells you where you can place things, but also how tall they need to be. So proportionally, this person, if I were to put them in at this point here and they were standing up there, then we would say they're probably a 5 meter tall person, 4 meter tall, and it wouldn't be right. So we need to be proportional back to the vanishing point. So when they're standing on this line here and they are halfway up the doorway, if this is just under 4 meters, we know that that's about right for human height inside there. So that is going to be correct. So all we need to do is follow the vanishing point through their feet, through the top of their head, and that tells us exactly where they can be inside space. So if they're standing here in the middle ground, they can be this tall. If they're standing here in the foreground, they can be this tall. It's all proportional back to that vanishing point. And this is for trees, for textures, anything, should all be pointing back to that vanishing point. Very, very important. Vertical lines must be 100% vertical. So we can see here this line of our arch is vertical, so is this one, so is everything inside that space. And we'll show you in a second how to make sure everything's vertical. This is very important to perspective. Things will look a bit warped and a bit wrong if they aren't all vertical. And we will be looking for this when we're looking at your submission. So it's critical that you make sure that everything is running vertical. Horizontal lines must be 100% horizontal, which is straightforward. We can see this pink line running through here. That's horizontal. This is horizontal until it gets to this curve. That's horizontal. Top of here, that's horizontal. Perfect. And all objects and materials must be in proportion. So this is your set of rules. We also have a set of rules if we have a 2-point perspective. 2-point just means that there are 2 vanishing points. So we've got one set of lines which are all pulling towards this way. So even at the turn of this wall here, they're pointing back to this vanishing point. This line is pointing back to the vanishing point. Then we've got another set of lines. So this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here, these guys here are all pointing back to that point. So we've got 2 vanishing points which are doing the talking. Everything must point to one of these 2. So all of the planes running here, unless they're on an odd angle, must all be pointing towards the vanishing point on this side. All of the planes running this way must all be pointing to this vanishing point. Then, once again, all of our lines vertical must be 100% vertical, and everything that we add to the scene must be in proportion to the vanishing points. So if a person is this tall back where she's standing up against the cabinetry, we project out through her feet, out over the top of the head, and that tells us how big they can be. So let's go into SketchUp now and have a look at how to correct our vertical lines to make sure they're looking good and to make sure that we're setting the camera to the right eye height so that we're all at the right proportion and scale. So let's go into SketchUp and say, for example, we wanted to get into this part of the house here. We wanted to have a nice vanishing point looking straight down the barrel here. As I can see, my vertical lines are not vertical. So even though this is roughly where I want to be, my verticals aren't vertical, so I need to do some rotation. If I use the orbit and go upwards like this, I can see I'm getting closer to vertical. What I'm looking for is jagged lines in the close-up elements. So if I can get rid of those jagged lines, I can see I'm now vertical. Perfect. So this is now 100% vertical. If I then hold down Shift, and then hit my scroll wheel, that will lock those vertical lines into space. And now all I'm doing is going upwards and downwards in the Z direction. I'm not actually orbiting. So we'll see all my verticals stay vertical. I'm holding down Shift and I'm holding down my scroll wheel and I'm moving around, and that allows me to adjust the vertical height only. And this will then let me make sure that I'm in the right position to see what I want to see. Finally, what I need to do is adjust my camera angle to make sure I'm looking the right way. What I can do is I can grab this eye tool and that allows me to just look left and right. It is going to warp you quite a bit as well, so just keep that in mind. You can go left or right, but just always double check that you've got your vertical still vertical after you've moved around. But this gives you slightly more finesse and control and just making sure you're looking in the right direction. And then once again, once you've moved it over, you could hold down Shift, your scroll wheel, and just move it into the position that you're looking for. You'll notice also, very importantly, when you're on the eye tool, it has eye height written down here. Now I found this to be slightly incorrect, as in it's not 100% accurate in terms of the proportion of what we're looking for. So even though when we make perspectives we usually do 1700, I found that about 1500 tends to look the best for our perspectives. If anything, it's the eye height of a person who's a little bit shorter, but it's also the eye height which makes everything look a bit more grand and a bit more impressive. So we might do this on purpose if we were taking a photo of this project in reality to make it look even better. So don't be afraid of shifting your eye height a little bit lower than what you would normally. So 1500 is what I would use typically, and that's feeling pretty good. So now my verticals are vertical. Everything is pointing back to the one vanishing point automatically for us in SketchUp, which is great. And then all I need to do now is make sure my horizontals are horizontal, which they are pretty much. They're close enough. If it's worrying me, what I can do is I can move this over like that. There we go. Verticals are vertical, horizontals horizontal. I can then hold down Shift and make sure I'm at the right height and placement again. So that's 1500, close to 1500. Great, perfect. Verticals, horizontals, eye heights at the right spot. We are ready to go. Once we're at this point here, we're going to go over to our tab and we're going to go to scenes. All we need to do is click on plus scene, and then I'm going to go ahead and rename it. So this one, let's call it main exterior shot. Click OK. That is our main exterior shot, and then we've got that saved for us. So that means whatever we do, we move around here, we can go ahead and double click on main exterior shot, and it will take us back there nice and simple. So we don't have to keep going and setting up our verticals, horizontal, and our eye height every time because we've already saved it. So we can go, we can do editing, we can add more modeling, we can do whatever we want, and it's already in there for us, ready to go. The other thing we'll need to know how to do is to create a sectional perspective. So typically a sectional perspective just means that we're cutting a section, but we're looking at it in perspective at the same time. So all we need to do to make a section is to go up to our section tools over here, click on section plane, and then we need to click on the face that we want to cut through. So if we were to cut this way, we'll see what happens. It's going to go that way. If I do Control Z, I do it this way, it's going to cut this way. Once we have got that section plane in place, we can go ahead and move it. So if we click on it, we type in move, M for move, we can push and pull that through our building. So we can choose points in space, which are going to allow us to see our built form from the best possible angle. Now let's go ahead and we'll move this a little bit more. Cool, okay. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. That's looking pretty good. I can finesse that a little bit. So if I want to cut through that kitchen bench top, I can. If I want to pull it this way and have more of a depth of field and see more of that garden bed, we can. But I'm going to say maybe something between the two is going to be right for me and what I'm looking for. And that then creates our section plane for us. Now I've got fog turned on, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off for now so I can see more of what I'm doing. Cool, that's looking pretty good. And that is then my section, and we've got the same rules apply for our sectional perspective. So we want our verticals to be vertical, our horizontals to be horizontal. You'll find that the most successful sectional perspective tends to be the 1 point, because it allows you to, in Photoshop, when you're collaging later, add stuff to the left and right quite easily. You can also do something a bit tricky like this. However, keep in mind that this does tend to have the feeling of stepping over the edge of a cliff when you try and put this into collage later. So have a look at the previous student examples, think about what you would like to do, and then you can choose either a front-on perspective like this, or you can choose more of a side-on one here. And the last thing I want to show you before we save this view is you might want to change the field of view. not only for your sectional perspective, but for the other perspective as well. If we go over to camera, we can change our field of view. So let's make this much smaller so we can make it quite extreme, and you'll see what's going to happen. What it does is it flattens it out a little bit more and makes it a little bit more nuanced so that we can see each of the spaces. It feels a little bit tighter, everything's more in one spot. Let's do the opposite and we'll make that more extreme, 120. As we go back closer to this again, it extrudes everything quite dramatically. We can see this bench is now warped much longer than it would be there. And it's adding a lot more depth to that. So it depends what you're going for, whether you're trying to be quite dramatic, whether that really works for the project that you're looking at, or maybe you want to keep it quite straightforward, quite simple, and maybe a 75 or a 60 or something like that is good for you. The same thing applies if I just turn off my section planes for a little bit. If I go into that previous shot, the main exterior shot, if I change this field of view here, currently I'm on 70, if I change that to 30, that's going to really make it quite shallow, and it's going to make it hard for me because I'm going to need to fill in a lot of this stuff just to be able to fit it in. Likewise, I can bump this up to 120 if I want to, and that's going to make it really quite stretched and extreme in terms of what the field of view looks like. So typically I say around 70 is probably the most successful for most people. 70 to 90 tends to look pretty good, but just keep that in mind. That's something else that can have quite a lot of impact in what your final representation looks like. Once we have got that and we've saved all of our scenes, same technique by the way for that section, we just go ahead and save another scene and it will keep that section in place for you. Here's an example. If I go to my section cart, this one over here, double click on that, it'll automatically put the section cut, and likewise if I go back to that shot, it'll automatically take the section cut back for you. And if we make any changes to that, if we want to turn the section cut off, we could just turn it off up here and click update scene, right clicking on the scene. Pretty straightforward. Alright, once we've got everything done and we're ready to go, ready to export out from Sketchup, we've got all of our scenes ready, we're in the AIA stream, we've got one more thing to do. Double click on our shot, triple check that we've got our verticals vertical, horizontals horizontal, and we've got our eye height. Nice, happy with that. What we're going to do is export this as 2D lines to take into Illustrator to clean it all up before we put it into Photoshop. So let's go up to File, Export, 2D Graphic. We're going to go to PDF, this one here. We're going to go to Options. We're going to uncheck Full Scale if that's accidentally selected. Leave all of the rest of the stuff on here, that'll be fine. We're going to fix that in Illustrator anyway. Click OK, click Export. And then we're going to go ahead and open that up in Illustrator. Let's take a look. All right, we are in Illustrator. Go up to the top here, File, Open, navigate to where you've got that, the 2D lines you just had before. Here we go. Let's zoom out a bit and have a look. Cool. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to set up my sheet size to make sure that it's A3 so that it doesn't complicate things later. So Control R brings up the rulers, right click on the rulers, millimeters, and then what I can do is come down to the artboard tool, and we can see how big our artboard is. Massive. So I'm glad we checked this. We're going to go 420 by 297, press enter, and that is our A3 sheet. Now we can go ahead, Control A, and I'm just going to grab in this top corner up here, holding down Alt and Shift at the same time. I'm just going to rescale it so that it fits on the sheet. And I want it to be, ooh, yeah, that's looking good. Let's go, hold down Alt and Shift, get it so it just goes outside the page. Oh, yeah, just the edges is fine actually. Okay, good. So we've got some cleaning up to do, which is why we needed to come to Illustrator first. So if I click Control A, that's going to select everything for us. We then want to go to stroke settings. We're going to type in 0.1. That is going to get rid of all of that dashedness for us. Cool, that's looking good. Then we're just going to double click over on the question marks on the one that's the rectangle, not the full square, the rectangle. Double click on that. I'm just going to drag this all the way down into black. This is just going to change all of our lines into black for us, which is what we want. Good. Now we should see over here in stroke that should be all black. Then I'm going to do that again, 0.1, just to make sure everything's the same. It's a bit finicky, but we'll get there. And then we click on stroke again, and we're going to deselect dash line, and then that should get rid of all of the dashed lines for us. Perfect. So everything now should be just a series of lines. Now if 0.1 is still looking a little thick for you, we can go even thinner than that. What we're trying to do is make sure that when we get into Photoshop and we start texturing over the top of this, that we're not going to end up with little white gaps everywhere after we've put our textures in. So I'd say this is still too thick. So I'm going to go Control A and I'm going to go 0.05 for my particular drawing. Yours might be okay at 0.01, but we effectively wanted a hairline. We want it to be almost invisible. This is looking much better. What will happen is when I put a texture over this later and I turn the line layer off, there won't be a little white gap in between, or at least it won't be able to be visible. Then what we can do is we can go and delete all of the shades of grey. We don't actually need any of these shades of grey. They're not going to be useful to us, so we can go ahead and delete it. I'll show you a simple trick to do that. Of course, we can just click it and delete it. But if there are some that are the same color as lots of others, we can save some time by going up to the top once it's selected. So this one's selected. Go up to Select, Same, and then Fill Color. Select Same Fill Color, and that'll select everything that's the same. We click Delete, and that's going to delete all of those for us. And then same thing, select that one, select, Same, Fill Color, Delete, and then we can do that for all of these ones through here. So what we're trying to do is select all of the fills so that we just end up with the strokes, aka just end up with the lines. And then all you need to do is go around and delete all of those. If it's your first time in Illustrator because you didn't take on the challenge, Alt key while you're scrolling allows you to zoom around, and that makes life a bit easier for you. And then you can just go around and delete all of these shadows because we're going to be photoshopping over the top of these anyway. So we can just go ahead and delete all of that stuff. We don't need any of that in there. If you want to, you can go around and delete extra line work as well. All we really need is the outlines. So the outlines in space are going to tell us where the textures go. So anything that you don't want, anything you feel like is going to be annoying to you and get in your way, you can go ahead and delete it. I just want the outlines because that tells me where stuff goes. For example, this circle here tells me a tree is going to sit inside this space. All of these steps tell me exactly where my bits of textured concrete or pebbled stone are going to sit. I know my concrete slab is going to run inside there. I know this is going to be where my walls in the arches turn a corner, and so on. So we're just looking for the lines to tell us where to put our textures. Once we're happy with this, we go to File, Save As, and then we're going to save it again, but this time we're going to call it Illustrator Edited Lines. Turn Preserve Illustrator Capabilities off. Click Save PDF, click OK, and then we'll be ready to pull that into Photoshop. Let's go ahead and do that now. 420 by 297 is my page size, and I'm on millimeters. Typically I like to be at 300 ppi. Click Create, and then all we need to do is drag and drop that file that we made just before, and we're going to go to Media Box, which means A3 will sit inside A3. We click OK. We double click and we should have lovely, very, very thin, crisp line work to start to put stuff over the top of. You should basically be just about to see it. That's all. That's all we're looking for. And that is it. That is all you need to know for SketchUp, from getting to the very start from AutoCAD all the way to getting your exports out. After this, you should be good to go for Photoshop.